Welcome back to another episode of Proof of Vision. In this episode, I had on Alex, head of ecosystem over at ZetaChain. ZetaChain's a universal L1 that connects natively to any other blockchain network. So this includes, smart contract platforms like Ethereum and other chains, and then even some non-programmable chains like a Bitcoin. So if you didn't tune into last month's episode in June, we also covered ZetaChain with Dennis, the head of developer experience. So give that episode a listen as well to get a good understanding of the ZetaChain architecture and their more broad approach to solving the whole problem of like cross-chain liquidity and cross-chain DeFi. In this episode, we focused a little bit more on ZetaChain's approach to onboarding new chains, what kind of ideas are enabled with ZetaChain's universal apps. So this basically allows like developers to deploy one instance of an application and then tap into liquidity, users, even like wallets and tooling from various chains, right? So we also touched on ZetaChain's, their approach to onboarding new chains, specifically Sway, which the ZetaChain Sway mainnet integration is underway right now, as well as Ton, the Ton chain, which is a bit of a newer addition. So definitely listen to both episodes and check out our resources on ZetaChain as well. We have multiple reports on our platform. Welcome back to another episode of Proof of Vision. Today I have Alex, head of ecosystem over at ZetaChain. Alex, maybe you want to give like a very brief introduction, background on yourself before we get started?
Sure. Great to be here. Name's Alex Kim, head of ecosystem here at ZetaChain.
Very nice, very nice. And so we've actually released an episode 1 with ZetaChain before, actually. But for those who maybe didn't listen, didn't watch, can you give us like a 1 minute, 2 minute refresher? Like what is ZetaChain? What is the core problem that you guys are looking to solve?
Absolutely. So the most simple way to explain it is from a developer perspective, every time you want to launch on one chain and you want to launch on multiple other chains, you have to deploy smart contracts on each of those chains. That's time and that's money. And then depending on what app you're building, you may also need to source liquidity for those other chains as well. Case being, there's an example with GMX when they integrated Avalanche, but most of the liquidity was on Arbitrum. So it didn't really matter whether they integrated Avalanche or not. Users end up just using GMX and Arbitrum because that's where the deepest liquidity was. So there's a couple problems here where most of these projects, they do a multi-chain approach, and it's mostly for user acquisition, but at the end of the day, the long-term result is that no one really cares. It's only time and money spent on these developers, and for users, they end up just going to a chain that has the most volume and liquidity anyway. So we're tackling this problem where just deploy your app on ZetaChain once, have a single state application on ZetaChain, and by default, out of the box, a user can connect their Bitcoin wallet, they can connect their EVM wallets, and also they can connect their Solana wallet to use this app on ZetaChain. So for the developer, you only have to launch a series of smart contracts only on ZetaChain, and you only have to source liquidity only on ZetaChain as well, and the protocol will handle the rest.
Okay, yeah, definitely. As you mentioned, the liquidity fragmentation. So, I mean, we have like in-depth materials at this point now released covering, the ZetaChain's own protocol architecture and more of like the mission statement, ethos, the problem that it's looking to solve. And our audience can definitely get a much more in-depth view of ZetaChain's vision on our platform. But for the audience, like we can get into the specifics of it. Like, how does ZetaChain actually connect to all these, other external chains under the hood? And how would you describe like the universal app thesis at ZetaChain?
For sure. So to answer the first part, we use something called MPC TSS. And just to make it as simple as possible for some of the listeners here, MPC TSS is just a custody address on all the chains that we're connected with. So we have a custody address on Bitcoin, we have a custody address on the EVM chains, on each different EVM chain, and we have a custody address on Solana. We have a subset of validators, which are called observer signers. And pretty much their responsibility is, hey, Alex deposited 1 Bitcoin into this Bitcoin custody address, Therefore, the protocol will mint out a ZRC20 version equivalent. So in the case with a swap example, let's say a user wants to swap from Bitcoin to Solana without bridging. The observer signer say, oh, okay, Alex deposited 1 Bitcoin into his custody address, will mint out a ZRC20 equivalent, and it goes through a DEX and it swaps into ZRC20 Solana. That ZRC20 Solana is burned, and the equivalent version of that Solana from the custody address is sent to the user in their Solana wallet. All of this protocol complexity is just done in a one-click UI UX for the user. So all the user really has to do is just click Bitcoin, swap into Solana, how much do you want to swap into, and just click swap. That's it. The protocol handles all that complexity we just talked about. To answer your second part is, how would I describe universal apps to a broad audience? The easiest way to say it is, if you use our apps, if you use our universal apps, you can use any wallet from any chain. And we abstract all the complexities away of having to bridge or wrap your tokens. I guess another way to explain it is just an app where any user from any of our connected chains can just connect their wallet and just use the app as is. You don't have to worry about wrapping or bridging your asset. You don't have to worry about liquidity fragmentation or which chain has the highest liquidity. That doesn't matter.
Alchemix Finance empowers you to spend and save at the same time with a self-repaying, interest-free, non-liquidatable loan. Deposit your assets and access your future yield today. Available on Mainnet, Arbitrum, and Optimism. Head to alchemix.fi to get started.
Right. And yeah, I mean, for those that don't know, ZetaChain does support native Bitcoin, native BTC without using, the like more traditional wrapped BTC. So can you maybe walk me through like the thought process around integrating that? Like I know Hyperliquid has, kind of pushed that initiative as well. So why is having native BTC as opposed to wrapped BTC important? Did you guys kind of just like plan ahead that there would be like end demand from users for this?
Yeah, I think the significance is already there. I think even with L2s or even some of the solutions that you just mentioned, a lot of the L2s right now, Bitcoin L2s and even other chains that are accepting native Bitcoin, it's actually not native Bitcoin, right? It's a two-step process actually. So keep in mind that all the apps on ZetaChain is a one-click UI UX. So even if you're using native Bitcoin, you don't have to worry about whether you're going to receive the wrap version or whether you're going to have to lock up your tokens or bridge your assets or mint out a token. All that complexity is abstracted away because the protocol handles it ourselves. So when we compare ourselves to Bitcoin L2s or even some of these chains that are doing it, let's just talk about the Bitcoin L2s right now. What happened in the past with most larger Bitcoin L2s is you lock your Bitcoin, but then you receive a wrapped equivalent version, let's say, I don't know, wrapped Bitcoin. And then you use that wrapped Bitcoin on other ecosystems. It's not really using native Bitcoin, though, is it? You're just using some EVM version, ERC20 version of a native Bitcoin that's just locked in a multi-sig or some sort of wallet that's controlled by some users and the protocol or whatever their L2 mints out a version, an ERC20 token version. It's all about narrative. I think people used it. I think that's why the L2, Bitcoin L2 hype kind of died down, which is quite unfortunate. Because people start to realize that it's just an ERC20 token. Like you're actually just interacting as if you're just like an EVM L2. There's nothing new to it. Even with some of these other chains that are accepting native Bitcoin as well, it's the same exact thing. You're just bridging your Bitcoin, but then you're receiving some wrapped equivalent and you're doing it on their own ecosystem. So it's not ERC or EVM specific now. Other ecosystems are starting to do it. I think what people are missing the most, or what the promise of the Bitcoin hype in the first place was a user actually being able to use their native Bitcoin. So not just locking it up and then having them to download a MetaMask wallet, which is the most rudimentary and most, I don't know, it's just kind of like a unproductive thing I've ever heard in my life. You actually want users to connect their Bitcoin wallet and just have that Bitcoin deducted from their wallets and then just use the app as is. I mean, there's really no other question to it, and that's what ZetaChain enables.
Right. Yeah. I mean, especially like this year, we're definitely seeing, um, like market cap wise, Bitcoin dominance rise a lot. And yeah, I think it definitely makes sense. Like as that, trend continues, if that trend continues, right, Bitcoin dominance continues to rise, it makes more sense that, yeah, all these chains, ZetaChain, Hyperliquid, anything in between, they should try to get like as close as possible to native Bitcoin. Yeah, it's one of like the kind of like big, like failure points, I guess, for the BTC L2s is like the people with like the whales with like a ton of BTC locked up. They didn't want to they didn't want to keep it there. Like they didn't want to do anything with it. They didn't want to go to any L2s or bridge or do any of that. Yeah, they didn't want to use Ravi. They don't want to use MetaMask.
Yeah, I think
Exactly.
definitely. Just like to bounce off, just off of that idea, I think it definitely opened up a different market than what we expected, though. So I think after that initial Bitcoin L2 hype, or even the other solutions now, what we're seeing is all these Bitcoin equivalents right now. Now we're seeing like, I don't know, 10 plus different wrapped Bitcoin equivalents. And I think a lot of it's just like so unproductive. Like, I don't know who's going to use a wrapped Bitcoin equivalent and hold it in your cold wall. I certainly wouldn't. And I think it just opened up a lot of different opportunities that we didn't expect. I think a lot of these chains now that are very much Bitcoin centric, I think they just found a cheat code to it now. So what a lot of these people are doing is they're just working with Bitcoin whales or maybe some wrapped Bitcoin providers. And then they say, hey, deposit like 100 million, come over to our chain and we'll pay you like 5%, 7%, or whatever the market rate is under the hood. And then all these Bitcoin providers are just wrapping their Bitcoin, just issuing out an ERC20 version of it, just depositing it into these money markets or DEXs, mostly money markets and restaking protocols. And it's just reflecting the TVL of that chain. So even like chains that have like claims to have 500, 700 million TVL, and then you just go into their money market and like half of it is a wrapped Bitcoin. And then you see that no one's actually borrowing against it. Like there's like 100, 200 million in this Bitcoin that's being supplied, but only users are borrowing like 10K worth of it. It just shows you that it's an unproductive asset in their ecosystem as well. And it's just purely for vanity metrics.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these utilization rates they definitely are low. Like I don't want to throw them under the bus too much, but yeah, I think anyone, especially like last year, that dug into it, kind of like ended up at that similar conclusion. So I think there definitely is more like demand for like more organic, I guess, adoption of that kind of stuff, you could say. But yeah, speaking of like these kind of market opportunities, we can like shift gears a little bit and talk about Sway. So yeah, I mean, Bitcoin dominance has been just like ever increasing, right? This year and even last year. But then Sway is like one of the big winners as well. We have like Hyperliquid, Sway. So I guess like how early did you guys kind of like see Sway and maybe think about incorporating it into the universal blockchain at ZetaChain? And yeah, just walk me through like the thought process and kind of like strategic conversations around that.
Sure. So I think the honest answer here is besides all the design and protocol architecture of Sui that's better, faster, and cheaper, perhaps, like any other chain, I think the main value add for us is it was an untapped ecosystem. At the time, we found this when it was last September. That's when I first brought it up to the team that we really need an integration with Sui. And I think just generally the honest answer here is there weren't a lot of bridging opportunities to and from Sui at the time. So even with native Sui and the stablecoins that were natively deploying on Sui, the on-ramping and the off-ramping of Sui at the time was still a pretty bad process. So unless centralized exchanges supported Sui, which they did at the time as well, the only way that you could off-ramp from a centralized exchange to Sui was only through a centralized exchange. There were no decentralized options at the time. There was no major bridge. There was no other major third-party provider that was doing it. And even with Sui's native bridge, it wasn't supporting a number of different assets from other chains as well. This is something to keep mind of. And this was at a time where Sui had this huge volume coming in when Thesis did their TGE, when a lot of these meme coins were launching on Sui, and obviously there's a lot of volume it's an opportunity, right, to be able to potentially capture that volume. And then we start to see a lot more stablecoin deployments happening on Sui, a lot more TGEs happening on Sui, and the volume just picking up tremendously. I think at the time when we found out about Sui, Sui was one of the only chains that had a significant net inflow of assets going into Sui, and all the other EVM L2s or maybe other competing chains, they experienced their first or other significant major outflows. So I think it was just a competing edge for us. I think it's quite obvious from what I'm saying. So we investigated Sui, our team learned Move, and we hired a couple engineers, and we said, hey, let's integrate Sui. And now it's finally happening.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I'll call it Sui as well for your sake. I'll ditch
No,
Sway.
you can call it, I feel like you
No,
can
no.
call it however you
Uh,
want, right?
yeah. I've always been like a Sway guy. Yeah, Sway and Aptos. But yeah, that's great. I think it's a really good thought process. Like even today, it's like you mentioned you had your eye on them like since before last September. Like even today, you recently had like the Cetus exploit. I mean, we covered that. Like it is still a very young, like emerging ecosystem even to this day. So it's definitely like if you're looking for an edge and to be early to like very up and coming ecosystem, yeah, this way definitely is kind of like a no brainer for that, especially as I mean even in recent weeks, like the dex to sex like trading volumes like for spot and perps like it's just going up and like it's staying very high. So yeah, you have more like centralized exchange trading volumes. I guess for Sway, the spot would be more relevant, like those meme coins, stuff like that on Sway. Not really like too much perps or derivatives on Sway yet. But yeah, like you definitely need like those intermediary solutions, right? Like a ZetaChain that can facilitate, bridging to and from, like Solana base, whatever it may be from these other very like speculative chains, right? You have like Solana base, like Sway. Like, these are like, some of the top on-chain ecosystems for like that hot money, right? So yeah, definitely very important to have like some strong glue between them, and I think ZetaChain could definitely help to provide that. So I guess we can talk in more about like the actual like behind the scenes. I guess like what was it like integrating Sway compared to? I mean, now we have like several like Move VM type chains, right? Sway, Aptos, Move. So like, what was it like kind of integrating that? You mentioned yeah, you had to maybe onboard a couple new engineers. Like, what are any like specific obstacles that had to be overcome? And yeah, just kind of walk me through that process from like start to finish, which would be yeah, like
Sure.
right now of actually integrating Sway mainnet.
Sure. So on the protocol side, I won't comment too much just because I'm not technical myself, but from at least what I saw is one of the hurdles was understanding the Move language because we've done so many things with Rust and Bitcoin and EVM. All those other three languages were quite native to us. But Move, I think it's quite a new language right now as well, right? So I think we had to do a learning for it. And I think one of the benefits is that when we were learning Move, at least the protocol team learning Move, um, I think one of the positive feedbacks was how clean and concise everything was compared to EVM, Rust, or even some other languages. It's just how clear and well thought out and how methodical the code was. So I think that was one of the benefits to it. But at least from an ecosystem side, I think one of the challenges of integrating Sui was what assets can we provide to the Sui ecosystem that Sui ecosystem users currently do not have access to. So besides EVM, how do we really think about the Bitcoin side of things? How do we think about bringing Solana to Sui? How do we think about bringing some of these other stablecoin opportunities from EVM chains over to Sui as well? So I think that was the challenge is how do we correctly create the right incentive mechanism so that for every new chain that we integrate, we make sure that it's a massive success and that users are actually using ZetaChain as well as these other chains to move their assets freely and to do other interactions as well.
Right. And would you guys, I mean, you don't have to like give me a yes or no, but would you guys consider integrating any other Move chains beyond Sway?
Actually, for right now, there's no new chains in the pipeline right now. We're not, just frankly speaking, we don't want to integrate all the major chains that are currently out there. Zeta Chain is a very lean team. We're about 30 people, actually. So for us to allocate maybe a couple of our engineers, it's more than 10% or even 20% of our entire team to only focus on new chains. It's the opportunity cost of what we could do ourselves to enhance the experience with the already existing chains that we have. So after Sui and Ton, we won't be integrating any new chains.
Right. Yeah, we can talk about Ton as well later also. That's also very important. Integration, yeah, they had that like the announcement with the integration with Twitter. That could be interesting. And then yeah, as you mentioned, like I think it definitely makes sense to not race to like onboard all these new chains, especially if you're staying
Mhm.
lean. I mean, it is just like a few. Yeah, it's like a few chains that are making up the majority of like the TVL and volume,
Right.
and users too, right? So you definitely do not have to. catch them all. So yeah, let's kind of like walk through a bit of like the user flow of ZetaChain. So like, yeah, we can use Sway as an example. So like, what actually happens when someone on Sway like deposits Sway into ZetaChain, into a universal app? Like, can you walk me through like what's going on behind the scenes, and then yeah, like how it
Absolutely.
interacts with the user?
So I'll talk about the standard swap example. I think I mentioned a bit earlier, but I'll just quickly recap that, and I'll introduce Gateway and how that provides a more value advantage over to the Sui ecosystem. So the easiest way to explain how the protocol works is honestly through a swap example of ZetaChain. So right now, let's say Bitcoin to Sui in this case. User deposits 1 Bitcoin, they receive whatever amount equivalent in Sui. The protocol will handle the deposits into the Bitcoin custody address. Protocol will mint out ZRC20 version of Bitcoin. Protocol will swap it into ZRC20 Sui using an available liquidity pool on one of the dexes. And then it burns that ZRC20 Sui. And then the native Sui is withdrawn back to the user's Sui wallet. So this entire complexity I talked about is just one click. So the user only has to select Bitcoin, what chain they want to swap from, select Sui into what chain they want to swap into, and just click swap. That's all they have to do. The protocol abstracts the entire complexity away, and even in this case, they don't have to pay gas fees as well. The gas fee is deducted from the destination and the source chain as well. The other example that I will give that brings a more value add advantage compared to some of our existing competitors, and what I don't think other competitors are doing at all, is something called Gateway. So Gateway is pretty much, we call them gateway signers. And they're pretty much a smart contract on all of the other chains that we're deployed on, except for Bitcoin. And they work with the custody address that I previously mentioned before. So now it allows that previous complexity of Bitcoin to Sui, but now a user from Bitcoin can now execute a smart contract call on Sui as well. So this is already functioning and working on mainnet for other chains, not just Sui right now, but I'll go through a current example of one of our apps called Amana, which is a yield aggregator product. And I think this kind of example really showcases what Gateway can do for Sui as well. So what typical other competitors do is just swap. And honestly, that's pretty standard. It's pretty competitive as is. I think there are other providers doing this, but maybe not as seamless as us. So in this example with the yield aggregator now, a user, let's say there's on Thesis, let's just assume that there's 5% or 10% APY or reward rate that's currently happening on their USDC pool. A user from Bitcoin wants to be exposed to that. They want to say, hey, I want to deposit into this USDC pool on Thesis for 10%. Okay, I'll do it. On Amana, what you're able to do now is connect your Bitcoin wallet, connect your EVM and Solana wallet, and you can deposit into the Thesis pool or money market, whatever, in one click. And this is already live. So a user on Bitcoin will go through that swap example I just talked about. But now when the user receives Sui, it calls the smart contract or the gateway contract on Sui to say, hey, with the Sui I got in my Sui wallet, now I want to deposit this into XYZ protocol. And then that Sui will be deposited into Thesis or whatever money market, and they'll get the LP token, stuff like that. That process is also now one click. So now in addition to the swap of sending Bitcoin to Sui, now a user on EVM, Solana, or Bitcoin can now send their assets over to Sui and deposit or do any other smart contract action with it on Sui in just one click. And by the way, it's not a hypothetical situation. This is already live. So I think that's like the main value advantage that we bring to any other ecosystem we integrate is, hey, we're not just bridging or wrapping assets for you guys or sending assets from these other chains to you all now. Now we're abstracting that and adding that one other step in and saying now you can also bridge and send assets, but then also do other smart contract things with it. So you can swap into other assets on Sui, you can deposit into money markets, you can deposit into DEX pools, you can deposit into whatever DeFi app or whatever app there is in just one click now.
Right. Earlier you mentioned the competitor landscape, you could say. So yeah, I mean, if you want to go in this direction a little bit, like, could you maybe lay out for those who are maybe not like super familiar with this space, like there's a lot of protocols building in this kind of space, like the chain abstraction type of space, or even like the cross-chain DeFi, or like you can get more specific, like just cross-chain borrow and lending. So like who are some of the kind of competitor protocols? Is there anything that you guys maybe not like take inspiration from, but like things that you like, things that you don't like, and then what is the like core at the core mechanism level? Yeah, what are like the like very core takeaways for users of like why ZetaChain is very differentiated?
Okay, sure. So, how do I simply explain this? So let's just take into example cross-chain money markets. I don't think there's a true cross-chain money market just yet, but let's just take into example abracadabra or magical internet money, magic internet money. The way that cross-chain lending protocols work for them, and even with Radiant Capital in the past or any other money market with messaging protocols, is the token itself is quote-unquote cross-chain, is quote-unquote omni-chain, and that's it. So there's really no, at least for us, cross-chain money markets is a user being able to deposit any asset from one chain and being able to borrow an asset from another chain in a one-click UI UX. That's what we envision. Current cross-chain money markets is not that. Instead, what you have to do is you supply an asset and borrow that asset, and maybe you borrow that asset, which is MIM, or whatever other token the money market uses that's cross-chain and uses the messaging protocol, whatever. And with that MIM, you have to go on a bridging solution or a swapping solution to send it across another chain and then deposit or borrow on a different chain. So it's not the one-click UI UX that we want as a protocol ourselves. It's actually still involving a manual bridging process and a manual sending process to have exposure from one chain to another through the intermediary of a cross-chain or omni-chain token. And I want to go into this now because the cross-chain omni-chain token itself is what powers most quote-unquote cross-chain solutions this day, which is the money market example I just talked about, and other DeFi solutions as well. So the token itself brings a lot of complexity, and I'll talk about why. So yeah, it's great that a lot of these tokens are using messaging protocols and other such standards to bring their tokens from one chain to another, but I think it's quite a limitation. I've always said this, and I think my thesis has always been the same, that traditional messaging solutions have brought a lot of great short-term solutions for longer-term problems. So even if you launch a token on one chain and you want to bring it to another, you still have that liquidity fragmentation. So you have to rely on that wrapped version now of that same token or the other token that's quote-unquote cross-chain or omni-chain, and you have to have a liquidity pool for it on those other chains as well. It's not just going to be having a one liquidity pool fits for all. It's just not there. You still have to rely on the liquidity that's already existing on some of those other chains. And this is why you see a lot of these quote-unquote cross-chain or omni-chain tokens using these messaging standards from our competitors only still siloing themselves to maybe 2 or 3 chains. They don't choose to expand, one, because they don't have the reserves, or maybe it's just because they can't provide enough liquidity to compete with the liquidity that they have for other chains. So they always keep it to just maybe 2 or 3 chains. That's it. And now I just want to reiterate again, because it is cross-chain token, quote-unquote cross-chain solutions are just using that token with a bridging solution that's built into the protocol or whatever app itself. So for us, at least how we differentiate ourselves is with our universal apps on ZetaChain. It really is a one-click UI UX. The user doesn't have to worry about bridging or sending assets from one chain to another. We want everything to just be as simple as use one asset, receive another asset on a different chain. That's it. In the case of a DEX, just swap one asset on one chain to one asset on another. It shouldn't be as complicated as that. For our yield aggregator products, you should be able to deposit into whatever opportunities, whatever money markets, whatever protocol that's paying out, I don't know, however much yield on stable coins, whatever other tokens, and you should be able to do it using any tokens from any chain. And it's live, it's on mainnet, you can deposit into these in just one click. All you have to do is click deposit now, and then that's it. Even with money markets, what we hope to build is that same exact experience, just a one-click UI UX. What if a user deposits stables and now they can borrow Bitcoin? this is what we want. We just want users to connect their wallets and just be able to do this in one click. We don't want users to think about all these wrapped tokens and wrapped, these bridges. Like, the goal for us is to abstract that entire terminology, abstract all those complexities away. Let ZetaChain handle it. The users only have to care about whatever assets they have on whatever wallets.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, all of our audience probably would definitely read like a lot of the existing solutions are kind of like band-aid solutions. Yeah, that are kind of like only like scaling issues and kind of more feasible adoption for like prosumers, not like new, entrants to crypto, new consumers. So yeah, there definitely is like there's like a cap on the total addressable market for these kind of solutions that as you mentioned. So let's kind of drill into like what kind of use cases you think universal apps enable, right? So it doesn't have to be like Sway specific, but yeah, when you integrate things like Sway and you're taking like all these top chains, Sway, Ton, and you're kind of making them much more interoperable for users and developers. Like, yeah, what are some core unlocks? Like, what are some interesting apps that maybe would not have been possible before that are now all of a sudden feasible, easier to roll out for developers, and maybe like the UX is now digestible for users as well. Like,
Absolutely.
yeah, what do you guys envision there?
I think there's two examples. One, I just talked about the money market
Mana.
one, so I think that's one on the DeFi side. I think that's quite interesting. I don't think there's anyone doing that anyone that's doing it right now. Even if so, it's just not the way that we envision it. So we want that. That's what we envision, a user to be able to deposit stables, any asset, borrow Bitcoin, other assets in one click. That's what we want. I think the other second experimental example is just mostly around launchpads. So the way that I think about it is there's like so many launchpads out there. There's virtuals, there's Pump.Fun, there's Flap, there's like so many different launchpads, AI agent launchpads, even on Sui, even on all these other ecosystems. And as a user, I want an aggregated experience now. Because for me, I actually trade on all these different chains and I use all those different launchpads as well, just myself. And it is so cumbersome to constantly have to switch networks, and even just having like I have my wallet connected by default to maybe, let's say, Sui. And then all of a sudden I want to trade on virtuals and I have to like log into my password again on MetaMask and then switch my network over to Base. It's just like it's just like for sure it's like a first world problem. It is like it is a privileged problem to have, but it's still redundant on the UI UX, especially if you're a user on one or more different chains. So one of the things that you can do on ZetaChain is an aggregator tool. So let's say that you want to build a launchpad aggregator. The launchpad aggregator could be like a trading terminal or something. And you're able to tap into, let's just ignore virtuals for the time being. You just can't do it right now with their new point system. But let's say for Pump Fun or maybe some other token launchpads, and you wanted to use, or you want to have an aggregated view of all these different launchpads, you want to get into it. So one of the builds that you can do on ZetaChain is, let's just say there was an app on ZetaChain that allowed a user to connect all these different wallets from Sui, Bitcoin, EVM, and even Solana. And now you have an aggregated view of all the upcoming token launches that are happening on Pump Fun or token launches that haven't even filled yet on maybe some other launchpads. Now, directly from this unified app or this universal app, let's just call it, you can use any of your assets from any of the chains. So now you can even use your BNB to be a part of a Solana Pump.Fun launch, right? And then you can do that in one single click. So then that goes back to the previous examples I've been talking about is now once you do that, all those swaps will happen through the protocol with the BNB to Solana side now, and now a gateway. Gateway being that smart contract that recognizes the custody address on Solana now. It says, hey, okay, this user got Solana, let's deposit the Solana into Pump.Fun, into the specific launch pool or this specific token. So all that in one click. Now you can use any asset that Pump.Fun doesn't support or Launchpads on Sui doesn't support using any of the existing chains and native gas assets from those chains that we're connected with.
This episode is brought to you by Pendle. Pendle is a leading protocol in the DeFi yield sector, operating as a permissionless yield trading protocol, facilitating the tokenization and splitting of any yield-bearing assets in DeFi. This allows users to speculate on future yield or earn a fixed rate on their assets. Learn more at pendle.finance.
Yeah, I think from users, definitely, like the rise of like trading terminals, kind of like validates at least on the user side, yeah, they demand for like an aggregator that, even if it just extracts away like the wallet experience, or even like using like deck screener, stuff like that. I mean, these trading terminals on just, yeah, like Solana only really, are some of like the most profitable protocols in crypto today. So, and that's, yeah, purely like a front end thing. They're not, it's just, that really is just a UX thing, for users, and users are willing to pay like very steep fees to access that experience, right? When you have like these highly volatile assets. And yeah, so I definitely think for Launchpad specifically, when you have everyone's trying to like make a ton of money. Like the users are trying to make a ton of money, and then the guys like actually deploying the tokens are also trying to make a ton of money, and they're much more fee insensitive. But yeah, there definitely is like room for improvement um, in that space for sure. So I would say, if you had to like delve a little bit more into Sui, like right now, I would say Sui, like the token, Sui as a token is definitely on everyone's radar, but the Sui ecosystem is definitely a little bit more nascent. Like, do you have anything? Do you guys see at Sui that you think our audience or people in crypto more broadly, um, maybe is like a little bit underrated? Or yeah, by integrating Sway, like what are you maybe looking to bring to your users beyond what you've already explained with Sway and the developer experience, and yeah, the ecosystem? Like, is there any particular apps, like you mentioned Thesis as well, right? Is there anything else in there, like on the Launchpad side especially, right? I feel like that's something that people definitely have not really been hearing about, is AI agents, or yeah, Launchpads on Sway. I know there are a lot of initiatives backed by Miston Labs like themselves on Sway. So yeah, is there anything particular that you guys are eyeing on the chain?
I think the honest answer to that is, I think it really depends on narrative. So at least for my hunch, or what my personal bet is, if the stablecoin summer is going to become a thing in the next couple weeks, hopefully, maybe not with everything that's going on, then people will care about Sui because they have a lot of stablecoin volume and they have a lot of native stablecoin deployments, and that's an advantage for us, right? Because we're connected with them. Or let's say the AI agents or DeFi, whatever that thing is, comes back in the summer and Sui has a great AI agent ecosystem, then people will care about Sui at the time as well. But I think the real answer to this, like just like a no BS answer, is I think it's all narrative, and whatever chain doesn't fit with this narrative will just not get the traction. But I think Sui is well prepared for it. I think there's only really a couple narratives that are going to continue to last, which is pretty much DeFi, stable coins with just how things are moving here in the US, and AI agents for how experimental and the shipping speed rate of some of these devs that are launching AI agents, even though it's like, even though the tech is questionable, it's just the rate of which development happens in terms of the AI agent narrative is just ridiculous. So I think these are the only two narratives that will be here to stay. I think Sui has done quite a great job of positioning themselves for these two narratives. So if that time comes, I'm sure that ZetaChain will also benefit from it as well, and benefit Sui from also using ZetaChain to tap into the other ecosystems that Sui is not connected with.
Yeah, and I mean, realistically, yeah, I definitely agree on the narrative part. Stablecoin summer is a good. That's a good one. Yeah, I definitely think Sway could have some tailwinds from that. But then at the end of the day, like a big part of it is also just like price, like the asset, and not even necessarily the chain ecosystem itself. There's definitely like a lot of people that just hold Sway
For
on a
sure.
sex, on a centralized exchange. And yeah, I mean, the price is definitely, you know it's like directly correlated with TVL. And yeah, when you have some of these, yeah, things like a Zeta chain, and you have more of these solutions that just provide more reasons to basically like bridge off, or off ramp, um, get on chain and get your assets off the sex, then yeah, it makes it that much more compelling. And on that note, we can kind of shift a little bit and talk about the Coinbase on ramp integration. So yeah, I definitely think, especially like right now, you mentioned stable coins. there's like a conversation to be had around yeah, like the necessity of on and off ramping. Like for stablecoins right now, like at the end of the day, you're still, yeah, you still have to like on and off ramp. Even like Stripe, some of these big acquisitions, still very dependent on like the end user eventually like getting off chain. So can you maybe explain like your guys' thought process to that Coinbase integration, and then also more like just on ramping in general, and like the chains that you guys are integrated with, and yeah, how you approach on ramping, like getting users off of centralized exchanges, right? You guys are integrated with chains that have you know market caps in the tens of billions. So there's a lot of capital definitely sitting on these exchanges that could be deployed. So yeah, what is your guys' like thought process around adoption and getting users on chain?
Yeah, for sure. I think this just has a problem to do. Before I go into the Coinbase, I just want to give a quick background on just the overall crypto product UI UX just completely sucks in Web3 right now. I mean, if you look at, if you really think about and just take a step back to really look at how we interact with crypto, it is just a convoluted multi-step experience, and everyone's common vision in Web3 is to onboard next billions of users into Web3, but no one has successfully done it because the user journey to get into crypto is still as terrible as it was a couple of years back. So just for example, if you want to get into Solana or even ZetaChain ecosystem right now, right, you have to get it from a centralized exchange or maybe some other way of doing it. And then you have to have wallets, and you have to have wallet addresses and maybe domain names as well. And then you send it from a centralized exchange to a decentralized version. With everything that's going on, now you have to be even more stringent that you're not adding an extra letter to your wallet address, or you didn't copy paste the wrong one, and or North Korean didn't send you a wrong wallet address, right? These issues should not be evident to the users in the first place. I think it's just as simple as that. You're targeting users that have never entered crypto before, but now you're telling them to make sure that your wallet address is the right one. Make sure that you're looking at these 32 different decimals and letters and numbers, and make sure that you don't have an extra number to it. I mean, what a terrible thing to say to a new user entering crypto. And then they finally get into the exchange. They finally get into the chain, right? Now it's like a sigh of relief. But then they want to swap into an asset, and then they go on a DEX, and it's like the most frustrating thing ever for a user. If it doesn't have enough liquidity, they don't know what slippage is, they don't know what throughput is, they don't know all this terminology. They just want to get one asset, right? But it's like, it's just never ending for them. Now it's like, as me, as a new user, okay, I finally did a security. Like, that took me a couple minutes. And now what the hell is slippage? Like, what is this 1%? What is this 0.5%? And then the swap failed. Why did it fail? I'm putting in my money. And they have to constantly do that, and they run out of gas. And then once you run out of gas, you have to go back to the centralized exchange to get more gas. And then at that point, I'm just going to give up. I'm just going to say, hands up. I'm just done with the entire experience. Like, it is probably like difficult. And that's why most people don't enter crypto. It's because they have that first example. They had the first step, and it was too much for them already. So this goes back into your question, which is why we did an on-ramping partner. I think it's just that experience of how do we translate fiat users to crypto. And I think maybe one of the first steps to get there is through partnering with an on-ramping partner. So directly into the app itself, now with our DEX, you can choose a fiat option. So instead of just choosing a chain version, where you're swapping from, you can just choose an option called fiat, and then you can swap into whatever asset on whatever chain. And then it'll pop up Coinbase. You go through maybe a small KYC, I think, and then you use your credit debit card, and then you get that asset. As simple as it is. So it's just like one of our first iterations, and what I think will improve the UI UX of having an on-ramping partner into some of these universal apps is now we forget about that entire on-ramping experience from a CEX to a decentralized environment. Now they can just do that all from a decentralized environment and only have to worry about, the credit card, debit card, what they're using. I think a user is more acclimated to using that than something like sending it to a wallet address.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we definitely already like this has been validated already. I was like, yeah, things like a Polymarket was like I think it was like the number one news app for a couple weeks there during the election, and yeah, there was like no one really complaining about like, oh hey, how do I get stablecoins on Polygon? Yeah, because it was very like interchangeable. They had the fiat option and then the USDC on Polygon option. So definitely makes sense. I mean, what kind of like, or I guess we can walk through like some of the specifics around it. Like, how many countries is this available in? Like you mentioned, yeah, you can go from fiat to Zeta. Like, yeah, how many like different currencies are available? What are some of like the maybe smaller nuances that, um, yeah, I guess protocols have to consider when undertaking this kind of integration?
Yeah, I don't know at the top of my head, but I've used my credit debit card. I'm based here in the US and I've used it. I think the good answer is we have a sanction list of different countries that and different wallet addresses are not allowed to use our dApps. And I assume the same goes for Coinbase as well. I think they have a pretty extensive list of what countries are banned from using it.
Great, great. Yeah. So when the users get on chain, yeah, you mentioned earlier about ton. So that's also a very significant, one of the largest assets, by market cap by FTV, and I think more interestingly, it has like a ton of actual users. Which is not the case for most chains, even those that have like a lot of activity. It's there's like one guy controlling like 20 wallets. So yeah, I guess maybe walk me through like what stage are you guys at with the ton integration, and then similar for Sway, like what was the thought process beforehand? Like what led to you guys like kind of scouting it out, maybe realizing that it could be interesting to add? Yeah, did you guys have any like interesting um, conversations with the Ton Foundation?
Yeah, for sure. I think for us, it's just the user acquisition. Same thing as you said, there's a lot of users on Ton, and they have a really great on-ramping experience, I would like to call it, because everyone uses, I mean, not everyone, but a majority of the users, especially in target countries like Europe or LATAM, or maybe in some parts of Asia, they use Telegram Wallet a lot. So for us, it's user acquisition. Oh, cool. They have all these different users from Ton, and we're able to bring them users from other countries that we're on, but also we can target those users to also use other apps and protocols, maybe on different chains as well, if they so choose. Yeah, I think that's really the thought process that goes into Ton. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I think it's really the opportunity of Telegram itself, how seamless they can integrate them into the Ton ecosystem without the users knowing. And if the users do choose to be more involved within the crypto ecosystem, using ZetaChain as a partner to tap into other ecosystems and other opportunities as well that are not typically live or present for some of these Ton users.
Right, and then I guess on the note of Ton, the other one that stands out is Kaya Chain, which is just using Line, yeah, like the kind of Telegram, like for more for Asia specifically, like Japan, Southeast Asia. Is that something you guys might consider, or more broadly, like do you guys think that that's a good kind of playbook to run for a chain to leverage like maybe like a very popular messaging app that has like very strong existing distribution and network effects? Like, is that something that you guys would want to see more, and that would make you interested in integrating a chain?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, but I don't think we've explored it too thoroughly right now.
That's great. Yeah. So before we sign off, do you have any last updates? Anything else to present to our audience? I mean, I think you did a good, yeah, you had a good sales pitch, like providing some good user flow, what people can expect. Yeah. Do you have anything else for our users of what they might like for a DeFi, DeFi like power user kind of audience, like what they might find interesting at this time on
Yeah,
Zeta Chain?
I mean, I think the simple way, I think a good way to close it off is I can sit here talking about the protocol for hours and hours, but it's so different from you actually using it. So for the users or even listeners who are on Proof of Vision, I talked about all this complexity on the protocol. I talked about, what we can do, what we already do, and it's a lot of talk without a lot of action. So I think the best way to just explore the ecosystem is to go on our website, find the apps that are targeted or tagged as universal apps. Go on our DEX, go on Mana, and just see for yourself exactly what you can do there in a one-click UI UX. I really think it's as simple as that. I think this is what crypto should be, especially with all these L1s, L2s, and so many other chains popping up. It's just such an unnecessary environment right now. I think it's quite noisy. I still think we really haven't solved the core fundamental problems of what developers and users go through. So I'm hoping that universal apps are a good solution for some of the long-term problems that users and developers face. So just to end it off, I can sit here talking about the protocol hours and hours, but I would encourage everyone here to just use the apps. You don't have to use a large sum, like $1 or something. And then just use the apps, test it out for yourself, and see if it's worth it.
For sure. Good answer. Yeah, just try things. Check it out. Check out ZetaChain. Check out the materials on our platform as well. If you want to even learn more, like if this podcast wasn't enough, we definitely have more coverage for anyone else that is even more curious. So yeah, thanks. This is a great episode and great having you on. And yeah, to the audience, thank you guys for listening, and make sure to tune in for another episode next week of Proof of Vision. Thank you guys.
Thank you.